If you're struggling financially right now, this might be the most important video that you've watched this year. I've worked with thousands of people from all walks of life in my business, and my goal today is just to give you a step-by-step process you can implement now to start improving your finances and build something much bigger and better for the future. So let's work together now and move from struggling to thriving and beyond, and let's get straight into it. Okay, so if you're in a position where right now you're struggling, we have to get a vehicle that's going to make us money quickly. At the end of the day, it's all well and good that somebody comes along and says, oh, go start a business or a side hustle or whatever, and it's going to make you rich and all that jazz. But the thing is, if you're in a position where you've got money required to pay rent or mortgage or whatever, and you're struggling, you need a vehicle that's going to produce money quickly for you. So how do we get immediate cash flow in our life? Well, there's a few different ways that you can do it, and some of them you may not love, and some of them you may quite like. First thing is we can get a job. And this is one that you might say, oh yeah, whatever, I can't believe this is a video that's promising me so much and you're telling me just to go and get a job. And look, I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but the majority of people right now, if you're in a position where you do have bills and you're struggling, you should go out and get a job before you go and start a business, because starting a business or a side hustle is great. We teach it here at Marketplace Superheroes, right? But it does take time. Like if it's starting to sell on Amazon, if it's working with clients or whatever, there's going to be a period of time required to go and learn the skill or go out and get the initial clients. And so getting a job is just a really immediate way to bring in that cash flow very, very quickly. And it would be ideal. It is the job that fits with your skill set. And also it would be great if this was a job that ideally was commission based. At the same time, commission-based is great in order to increase your income, but at the same time, if you have bills to pay and you're on commissions only, that is all going to contribute to a big level of stress. And right now, if you are in financial difficulty, stress is one thing you really don't need more of. So I would recommend a simple job. Highly recommend it connects to your skill set ideally. Again, I would say the other thing that you can look at too is looking for a job ideally in a particular industry that you would love to get into. Now, if you're really struggling, you don't have the time or the luxury to be choosy, but ideally go into somewhere where you get into an industry and ideally you can make connections as well, right? So an example of this, Steven Spielberg, many, many years ago, he wanted to get into the movie industry. He got himself a job in a movie studio. He assumed he got the job because he just actually walked into a movie studio one day and started working. So the legend goes, and then people saw, who's this guy? He's serving the coffees or whatever. Then he ended up actually getting a job there. But that's an example of where you can get connections, you can get some industry experience, and it can be a good position to be in. I would say at Marketplace Superheroes, from our position, almost every student that we have has a job because, look, why? At the end of the day, it comes down to one simple thing. It comes down to when we create income, we have the ability to invest in whatever it is we want to do, in a program to learn a new set of skills, in actual like stock or products or inventory in the case of selling e-commerce items online, buying traffic. All these things require some kind of money in order to be able to do it. And I live in a world where it's important to be hopeful, but also it's really important to be realistic. And so this is a realistic thing that we can do in order to improve our situation quickly and move on from there. Myself personally as well, how I got started in the Amazon industry, and if you want to call it an industry, was I actually took a job where I got to make connections and I got into the industry I wanted to be in because my initial mentor actually ran an e-commerce business selling on Amazon and on eBay, and I met him through a family friend. So I told people around me what it is I wanted to do, and eventually I got a call from my aunt introducing me to this guy. And I got a position where I didn't make very much money, but I actually got to work in the warehouse, do the picking and packing of boxes and the shipping and learn the customer support and all of those things. And it gave me amazing, well, obviously, experience. And that experience was huge. But also what was even bigger was, at the time I was reading business books like the E-Myth Revisited, and I was able to then use what I was learning from those books to improve my position inside that business. And eventually we started a new business together where we built a successful company on Amazon selling wholesale products. selling private label products as well. But that's how I got my start, and so that's something that you can think about. Now, if you have a family, kids, and things like that, you've got a lot of expenses. You can't just go and be an apprentice and make not very much money on the side. You got to take more responsibility than that. But that's just one thing you can do. We can get into the deeper levels of money and security in another video. I've made other videos like that on the channel, but this is going to be a very practical video today, because at the end of the day, if you're in financial scarcity, the worst thing you can do is just sit there and pretend you're not. You've got to do something about it, right? Because one thing I've learned, and it's true, is that motion does sometimes beat meditation. And there's other times where meditation is required ahead of motion. But I think we're talking about someone who you need to make money right now. You could just simply take you may already have a job, but you need to make more. And you could do you could be in the gig industry. So you could look at Uber, things like that. Those things don't make a lot of money, but at the end of the day, if you're paying for a car, for example, and you have insurance and whatever, well, you can get fairly easily set up on Uber. You're not going to become a millionaire, but you can use an asset that you already own, or it may actually, or in reality, it's more of a liability right now in a car, and turn it into an asset. Because that's just something else to think about when we're talking through creating a financial plan, actually, that really we want to, as much as possible, own assets over liabilities. Because what an asset means is that money flows to the thing. So let's say you owned a property. This is going to be a property, by the way. There we go. It's a terrible looking property. And how could you turn that, well, what could be considered a liability, into an asset? Let's say you rented out one of the rooms, this room right here, over on Airbnb. So that's an example there of how you could be using an asset you're paying for, or it could be a liability, and turn it into an asset. The same would be said for a car. That's where we can go ahead and we could use Uber, and we're doing the exact same thing. So that's a bit of a side note, but it's something to definitely think about as you're improving your financial position. Now let's talk about managing your finances. So we already just talked about getting a job and improving our situation right now. It gives us an ability to invest in things. And let's talk about finances, right? What can we do? So if you're in a really tough situation right now, the first thing to look at is to create a budget. And there was a great tool I used years ago called YNAB. And there was a book as well called You Need a Budget. And I would recommend looking into that. That was a really good business. But basically, that company, what they taught you to do is look at your monthly expenses, and you can put it on a spreadsheet. That's a good way to do it. And you can basically detail out what all your expenses are. And you can then calculate, okay, what is the total of all those expenses? And then from there, what you're able to do is you're able to start to assign different expenses, give them jobs, right? So every dollar in your bank account, it should have a job. You say you have to get your car fixed, and usually you get your car fixed once a year. And let's imagine, for the sake of this example, that to get your car fixed, it's going to cost you, I don't know, let's just call it $300 or pounds or euro, depending on where you're located. Well, you can divide that by 12, because there's 12 months in a year, would be $25 a month. You need that car expense in your budget for $25 a month. If you want to divide that by week, it's $6.25 every week needs to be set aside for that. So doing this on a spreadsheet is really helpful, because then you can look at all the different expenses that you're going to have, and you can include things like clothes and entertainment and stuff like that, so you can really understand all your expenses. And the simplest thing to do actually is just to go and get your bank statement. Ideally online, because most of these things are online now. And that's where you're going to see what a lot of your current expenses look like. And obviously, part of your role here in looking at your finances again is to get things in order. So if you are in a position where you're in a bit of financial scarcity and you're investing or spending a lot of money on things that really don't help you at all, you obviously want to go ahead and cancel any of those things that are just pure liabilities, pure costs that are making you no money whatsoever. Now then, what you can look at from here, and I've talked about this on the channel before, but we've got a 30, 30, 30, 10 method. We've assigned this to business before, but if we just look at it from a personal finance situation, this is also really, really helpful. So 30%, these are all percentages, of course, I should have said that. First 30% is going to go to essentials. These are things that you absolutely need, must have. This is just another way to look at your budget. You've got 30% for essentials. You could have 30% for example for investments. They could be getting a side hustle started. It could be actual investments like buying into index funds and things like that, which, look, if you don't have very much money, it's not really that great of an investment. At the end of the day, your goal right now is to increase your income. It's not to like take a minimal income and put it into something that's going to make you a very minimal return. You've 30% for education, you might say. That could be buying books, programs, stuff like that, things that can actually improve your life. And you would have a final 10% for fun. So if we look at this, and let's just say you're making like, you're getting paid like $3,000 a month, we would know straight away, okay, well, like $900 basically is for essentials. We got 900 here for investments, 900 for education, and we've got 300 for fun. That's very basic. You can split this whatever way you want, but the 30-30-30-10 method is a really good way to look at things. And you could just have it that it's like 5%, 5% and whatever. But I think just broadly looking at it this way is good, because what we get here is we get our essentials taken care of. We get some investments, we get some education, some fun. But what you might choose to do is you might choose to say, well, right now, I actually need to put more into education than I do into investing because I don't know how to make money. So you might choose to put 50% or 40% into education. But also you have to remember, you likely won't put 30% every month into education, right? It'll likely be an amount of money for a program or something like that, and then you wouldn't reinvest necessarily. It would go more into the investment category then, because now maybe you're buying products or whatever the case may be to actually like grow the business that you're looking at. But also, and this is another key thing about finances too, is you're really, as an employee, and I was that way for a long time, you're working on post-tax money most of the time. Whereas if you ever become a business owner, one of the big benefits is that you're working with pre-tax money. And that means basically that the government has not yet come in and taken their share. And that's something that's like a different concept, but an important one. Because let's say, for example, you buy a car, and let's say you're paying, I don't know, $300 a month for the car, right? Well, you're not actually paying $300 a month for the car. You're actually paying more like $500 a month, depending on where you live in the world. And the reason for that is because you already paid tax in order to receive this $300. So you probably are actually costing you more like $500 a month for the exact same thing, because the government have obviously come in and taken their piece of flesh already off the top. And that's just how it is, right? But it's an important thing to remember, that ideally we want to move to a world where we can make more of our expenses pre-tax. So a good example here would be if you take a flight, and the flight is for business purposes, just to be clear. Well, if you run the business and you take a flight, so I'm going to Canada soon, for example, and I'm flying business class over to Canada, well, I can actually put that flight through my business because I'm attending a business event. I'm using pre-tax money, I'm using the company's money now to actually buy the flight. And that just makes it way more tax efficient, because let's say that flight was $2K. Well, I'm actually paying $2K and I'm using the business's money, and this is actually a cost, which means that I'm going to be more tax efficient. Why? Because in a business, you get taxed on profit. And so this is a cost right here, this $2,000, because it's a flight. So this $2K, it comes off the profit of the business. Therefore, it is what we call tax efficient. So that's how that really operates. Whereas if you're in a situation where you buy a business class flight with this kind of income at $2K, that actually cost you more like $3,500, right? Because you used post-tax money. If you're enjoying this video, by the way, do give it a like. And also, if you want to learn more about how we can help you get something started to improve your finances, type FBA down below in the comments, and we'll send you a free guide on how to get started and how to get building your income with what we know how to do. Anyway, let's keep moving here. The third thing here is to invest in yourself. And I know you've heard that before, right? But Warren Buffett is one of the greatest investors of our time. He recently retired actually at 94, which is incredible. He took a Dale Carnegie course when he was young, and he said that investment in learning how to speak, learning how to communicate better, that was the greatest investment he ever made, because he invested in himself. So if one of the greatest investors of all time is saying one of the best investments is in yourself, we should be taking notice of that. How can you invest in yourself? Well, we mentioned an education budget a minute ago, but education is vital. And look, we live in a world where there is a lot of great free education on places like YouTube, of course. There's even nowadays, like there's shorts on like TikTok and stuff like that that are really, really helpful. And there's even things like AI now. We can use artificial intelligence to get some step-by-step information on how to do things. But for me, when I talk about education, yes, books, yes, all that is there. I guess what I'm more so talking about though here is support from people who have already like achieved what you want to do. So support from mentors really is what I would be talking about with education. Because yeah, there's a lot of information online, but I think support's critical, mentors are critical, but also it's like the right information. I don't know about you, but I have spent a lot of time on YouTube, and sometimes it can be really difficult to get it, like to know whether or not the information is even correct. And even on AI is amazing, but you need to know exactly how to prompt it in order to get what you want. Because I've had many prompts back from AI, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I might have used that information, and it was some of the worst information I've ever seen, particularly when it comes to like writing content and things like that. So like we have to have a level of education and a level of support and mentorship in order to know that we're doing things the right way. And so the simplest way to go about that is finding these mentors out there who are doing what you want to do, or they have a methodology that makes sense to you. And really what you're investing in then is you're investing in the years of trial and error that those people made. And that's something that I continue to do now, this year and beyond, because I want to be able to save that years of learning and just pay an amount of money to just skip all that time and jump straight to the good stuff. And that's something I would highly encourage you to do as well. As somebody who is looking to improve your life and improve your situation. Now, at the same time, I do want to caution you a little bit when it comes to investing in yourself on a few things. So the first thing is, if the promises people are making to you are really like outlandish, I would go very carefully about like taking my money and investing in somebody like that. And an example of a promise like that would be, well, you could go from zero to making 30 grand per month in the next like 90 days or whatever, right? Because while it's not impossible, and I am an optimistic person, for if you're a total beginner and you're starting over here and there's 30 grand per month here, right? Like there's a lot of steps you're going to need to take. And also there's going to be errors. That's what the red suggests. Errors along the way to getting to here. And what you have that like is underneath all of this is what? You've got learning curve. It's kind of curvy what I just did, I think. But it's a learning curve. It's going to take you a bit of time. Even if you have support and mentorship, it's still going to take you a bit of time to do that. And that's why I tell people, look, if you want to improve your situation quickly, don't quit your job and go and start some random side hustle, because that's going to be difficult. Go and find someone who has a real process and you want to model that. Okay. Also, like the other thing to be really cautious of nowadays as well is look at the intention behind the people that you're working with as well. Look, at Marketplace Superheroes, we're not a charity. We're quite clearly a business. We sell different types of support and mentorship and stuff like that. But at its core, our intention is to help you become successful. Whereas I see a lot of people out there, their only intention is to get you to become a salesperson for them. At the same time as saying all that, if you go through a program or an experience and it just blew your mind and you got great results, and then you have an opportunity to be able to tell other people about it and get a commission if they choose to buy on your recommendation, that's completely different. I'm just talking about though, you come in as a beginner, so you buy their course over here, and the only way to make money with their course is what? Is to sell their course or their experience. And I drew a pyramid there because at the end of the day, that's pretty much a pyramid. The only way to make money is to sell more of my course. And so there are things to watch out for. Let's talk about the next step in our journey here, and that is to, now we want a vehicle for wealth. So we had a vehicle at the start, which was kind of like, all right, I need a way to make money like now. Now let's talk about actually increasing your wealth. And so the first thing is you need a machine. Here I go sounding like one of those infomercial people, but no, you need a machine, because you need to be able to like do something over here, then it goes to here, and what's happening? It's moving up, right? So why is it moving up? Because what is happening is you're getting an ROI, you're getting a return on your investment. Now, there's different ways to do it. Obviously, if we talked about, say, selling on Amazon, for example, like that would be one way to do it. And what that would look like is that we would buy products, and depending on the way we bought them, we were going to get a return, an ROI. So we're going to increase our original investment by a certain percentage. That could be anywhere from 20% to 200%. And the key to becoming wealthy over time is to find ways where we can get a return on our investment without always having to put in time. Because that's the other critical feature here you got to be aware of. Time is so important. Because if the only way to get a return is to pump in time, you have something that is not very, what we call scalable. All right. And that's a business term and whatever, it's a bit whatever, but it's also true. What does scalable mean? Taking something that's working a process and then scaling it up, doing it at a much higher level, taking something that works, doing it 100 times over. Whereas if it all comes down to you working, well, then you can't do that. Now, obviously, you could outsource where you can buy other people's time, but still, it's not very scalable. And that's actually an example from even Marketplace Superheroes, for example, like coaching, for instance, one-to-one coaching, that is not scalable because you have to be there to put in the time one-to-one. What is scalable is putting people into groups and things like that. So that's just something from an education business, what that looks like. The journey then on Amazon. So like, let's talk about the kind of the Amazon seller journey or the wealth plan. So we'll put Amazon at the top just as an illustration. Here's a way you could actually go about it. So you could start with arbitrage. Let's say you're a total beginner, right? So arbitrage, what does that mean? It means that we buy items at a discount, already pre-existing brands. We buy them at a discount from retailers. We sell them on Amazon for full price. Not every product is going to be perfect, but that's part of it. The second way is wholesale, similar to arbitrage. And here, what we're doing is we're buying existing well-known brands, we're buying them from distributors, and we're selling those on Amazon. And the key change here, or difference between the two of these, is really the volume. You can buy in more volume at wholesale. You're buying only 3 to 5 units of each item at arbitrage because you're buying from a retailer. But ultimately, they're the same concept. You're selling existing brands over on Amazon. And then the third thing you can graduate to is your own brand. Now, this is not for everybody. This is where you would import something from another country. You would actually take an item that already exists, put your own label on it, your own branding and all that, and then you'd send it over to Amazon. You would sell there. I don't know why I started drawing that because I think that was pretty clear what we were talking about. But that's a great way to go because what it enables you to do with this little plan is you can kind of start with low risk. Also, you can start with a low budget, and then you can get your confidence, and then you can kind of grow from there, really. It's a really safe way to go. And in all of these, what we're doing is we're getting a return. So if we were to look at the returns on each of these, the ROI here would be 30% minimum to as much as possible, but often 30% to like 150%. Growth on your money every time you make a sale after all expenses. This is probably more like 15% to 25%. Private label, having your own thing, 80% to whatever, 300% or more, right? So obviously what you're seeing here is that private label is quite clearly like the highest return on your investment. But also what you have to understand with private label, obviously with high returns come bigger risks, right? Now, as you become more successful in business, like that's not going to be a major problem for you. But when you're just starting out, it's very normal to just try to avoid risk at all costs when it comes to growing your income. But you have to understand something, that we are all in the business now as it stands. Even as an employee, you're in the business of risk management, right? And that's what you're here to do. Because every day you go to work, like you're taking a risk that you're going to still have a job in a month, in a year. Like, that is a risk, right? So we're here to manage our risk while also improving our returns as much as we possibly can. And that's really how we do that. And we teach you how to do any of those. Now, of course, if you haven't already, do like the video and comment FBA down below. We'll send you a free guide that will teach you more about these models, and you can choose which one you want to start with. So FBA down in the comments down below. And when it comes to any of these models, like, I'm not going to break them down in big detail. We have tons of videos on the channel about all of these. I'm just saying, whatever you choose to do, you're going to want to grow it, and you're going to want to scale that. And how we're going to grow with arbitrage and wholesale mostly is through the magic of outsourcing. Because we mentioned this earlier on, but it's a really important concept. It's like, let's say you can work, let's just say you can work for 8 hours a day, and you're gonna work for 5 days a week. That means you're gonna work for 40 hours. I don't know why it did that. 40 hours, that looked weird. 40 hours a week, okay? And that's cool. But the other side of this as well is that, what if you were able to bring in like another few people? So another 40 hours here, you had another 40 here, another 40 here. So all of a sudden now, you've got 120 hours here, plus your 40. Now you have got 160 hours. Looks like it does something weird when you do maths here on the iPad. I don't know why it's doing that. But you have 160 hours. So you have like quadrupled all in, let's just say, 4 times it, right? You could say 3 because you still are putting in the time yourself, whatever way you want to look at that. We've dramatically increased the amount of time that you can work on something by paying for it. And that's a really good use of your money. But when you're starting out, you're not going to even worry about outsourcing. All you're going to be looking at when you're starting is simple. It's just getting a process that's working. And a job is the easiest process because we know it, all but guaranteed to make you money, right? And the goal here is just to get our process in place and grow it with time. And what this all comes down to really at the end of the day is getting systems in place. And everything, when it comes to making money, it's all systems. From selling on Amazon to being a freelancer with AI, whatever it is, everything has a system. Learn the pieces of the system and then become an amazing implementer. Then take that system and share that system with these people right here and have them do the pieces of the system that are lower in value. So I'll put value over here in red, signify lower in value. That's the kind of stuff you're going to want to get your people that are helping you outsource to do. You don't want people that you're outsourcing to early days to do things that are like critical, because you want to make sure that those things are done correctly and properly. But also what you don't want to do is you don't want to just like outsource something without any experience yourself. So we always get experience of something, of a process, looking at that again. We implement it, we then systemize it, we then outsource it. So I hope you got some ideas today about how you can improve your situation now and into the future. And if so, do give this video a like and jump down below and comment FBA if you want our free guide on how to get started with this kind of stuff, how to get your business up and running. And while I have you here, and while you're doing all that, make sure you move on to this video next because it's really going to help you. I hope to see you in the next one.